As I begin this morning, I'm just going to begin with a question, just ask you this question and think about it for just a brief second. And the question is this: have you ever found yourself alone in the dark? Now, I'm sure that's happened. You found yourself alone at some point in your life in the dark. And in the dark, what kinds of feelings do you have when you're alone in the dark? Particularly if you're alone. A certain sense of loneliness. There might be a bit of fear. Now, I want you to just kind of continue to remember that feeling throughout the whole message. But as I take a next step to kind of talk about that feeling from the perspective of somebody whose world is always dark. They can't see. They're blind. Think of that loneliness that you feel because you're blind, your inabilities to navigate and make your way around, the aloneness, the loneliness that you experience, the fear that you might have. Most of us are not blind, but Jennifer Rothschild is, and she's a teacher. She's a Bible teacher. She's been blind since 15 years of age. And she talks about her blindness, and she talks about a lot of things, but she talks about her condition of being blind in her DVD series. It's a teaching series titled Fingerprints of God. And she begins with this story, and I'm just going to invite us to read along these words of her story, and again to think about what it feels like to be blind. She says, "It was a very crowded bus, and all the passengers looked sympathetically as Susan, all alone, made her way down the aisle. She fumbled with her cane and nestled herself into her seat, alone. The onlookers just watched with questions and concern. It had been a year since Susan had lost her eyesight. When she first became blind, she fell into a deep pit of depression. The darkness swallowed her in her aloneness. Not only was her heart crushed, but so was her husband, Mark. But because of Mark's love for Susan, he was determined to help her. So he worked with her on her skills, the skills that she needed for her to return to normal, independent living. After months of work, Susan began to feel more confident. She decided she wanted to return to her job. But to get to work would have to require a bus trip, and that would be all alone. And Susan said to herself, "I can't ride the bus. I'm blind and alone. How am I going to know how many stairs there are? How am I going to know what path to take?" But Mark promised her that he would do whatever it took to help her until she felt confident and independent on the bus. So he helped her with the route to the bus stop. He helped her to learn the stairs. And after 2 weeks of practice, it was time for Susan to make the journey alone. And so on Monday morning, she got up, she got ready, and off she went in utter darkness and all alone. It was a crowded bus, and all the passengers looked sympathetically as Susan, all alone, made her way down the aisle. She fumbled with her cane and nestled herself into her seat alone. And the onlookers just watched with questions and concern. Now, I think most of us are just onlookers, right? We are onlookers to those who are blind, never having experienced blindness. Now, Christine, who we all know, who serves us on Sunday morning, we know she's blind. She understands the depths of this. This morning, our message isn't to talk about blindness, and it's not to talk about being empathetic towards those who are blind. That is a good message. But our message this morning is to consider how we might be alone in life. And in the loneliness of life, it can feel very dark, very alone, and the passerbys of life, the people in our life, just kind of go by unaware. Seemingly, they're the blind ones to our loneliness. And then the next part of our message this morning is to consider how sometimes in life we feel that sense of loneliness and feel as though God is blind. God is unaware. God is unempathetic, not sympathetic, unaware of the blindness, or unaware and blind to our aloneness and loneliness in life. Now, you may be here this morning and sitting around a bunch of people. You may, in fact, live in a house full of a bunch of people and yet experience loneliness. We talked about this in our series back many weeks ago. Today, the twist is slightly different, as we will be looking at it not so much from the relational standpoint, human aloneness, but the loneliness that we may feel between us and God, and wondering where is God in the hardships and the difficulties in our life. So we are in this series, Genesis, it all starts here. It's a series where we're working through the book of Genesis. I hope that you've been reading through the book. If you haven't, you can start now. We have lots more to cover in the book, but it is a good read to get an understanding of the beginning of things, the beginning of the universe, getting an understanding of who God is, an understanding of where we as people came from, understanding of our relationships with other people, and then the complexity and all the new things that we identify and learn about life comes through the book of Genesis. It all starts there, including God's selection of the man Abraham. This is a big part of Genesis, right? God selects Abraham and says, I'm going to bless you and turn you into a great nation. And then after that story, we read about Abraham's son Isaac and God's blessing of Isaac with the same promise, I'm going to bless you, turn you into a great nation, give you this land. And Abraham and Isaac have lived their lives waiting for these promises for God to come through. And in many ways feel alone in their journey, wondering, where is God amidst all of this? The next story that we looked at was the story of Isaac's sons, Jacob and Esau. And Jacob and Esau as brothers and their sibling rivalry. And now Jacob the younger, even though they were twins, born minutes apart, Jacob the younger would be the one whom God would bless for whatever reason, we don't know, but because God chose Jacob. For what reasons? It's definitely not because Jacob was more righteous than Esau. Because as we saw in the story with Jacob and Esau, Jacob is a deceiver, right? And a thief. He stole his brother's birthright. He stole he deceived his father and stole the inheritance, the blessing from his father. He stole it from his brother Esau. So this was the last story we looked at in Genesis chapter 25, 6, 7. And today we're going to look at Genesis chapter 28. So it's the story that follows immediately after the sibling rivalry. And what happens next is the story is that Esau is so angry with his brother that he plans to kill him. Rebekah, their mother, hears of Esau's plans to kill Jacob. And she concocts her own plan. She goes to her husband, Isaac, and says, Isaac, your son Esau has married Hittite women, these foreign women, and has created all kinds of havoc, and my life is miserable because of her. Don't let Jacob marry such a woman. Instead, have Jacob return to my family and there find a wife. And so through her deceiving ways to get her son successfully and safely out of harm's way from her other son, Esau, Isaac agrees. And this is where we pick up the story in Genesis chapter 28. Verse 1, so Isaac called for Jacob, and he blessed him, and he commanded him, do not marry a Canaanite woman. Go at once to Padan Aram, to the house of your fathers, or to the house of your mother's father, Bethuel, and take a wife for yourself there from among the daughters of Laban. That's your mother's father, your mother's brother. Then Isaac sent Jacob on his way. And so Jacob is now off. Now, what happens next in the story is Esau finds out about his mom's distaste for his wife, and so he goes and gets another wife, actually a wife from his half-brother Ishmael, his daughter, marries her. And then we pick up in verse 10, and this is where I want you to, again, go back into this sense of being alone, okay? And this is where we're going to find Jacob. So Jacob leaves Beersheba. This is where mom and dad are. This is where his brother Esau is. So Jacob left Beersheba because his father sent him out. So Jacob left Beersheba, set out for Haran. Okay, so this is a 550-mile journey back to Rebekah's homeland. Remember, we looked at that story where Abraham sent his servant to go find a son for his son Isaac, and how the servant prayed for God's guidance, and God supernaturally superintended and providentially brought to Isaac Rebekah. Right? So, and he had to make this journey. It's a 550-mile journey. We talked about what that would be like to have to travel 550 miles. And so Jacob is on this journey to go 550 miles. The next part of the story, when he reached a certain place, that certain place we learn later in verse 19, that certain place is Luz. Luz is 40 miles north of Beersheba, where he'd set out. So that means that in one day he traveled 40 miles. That's a long ways to go on a bicycle. It's a long ways to go on foot. Did he have a camel or a donkey or a horse that may have assisted in this? We don't know. But 40 miles in one day is a long ways to go. When he reached this certain place, he stopped for the night because the sun had set, and taking one of the stones there, he put it under his head and lay down to sleep. So we're just going to pause and reflect for a few moments here in the story. So we have this guy, Jacob. He's tired. He's got to find a pillow. There's no pillows, no such thing at this point in time. And so he finds a stone. What's interesting is historians, archaeologists have found these sleeping places throughout the ancient Near East. This isn't just a biblical thing. This is a historical fact that people, as they lived their life and as they traveled about, needed a place to sleep. And living outside the way that people used to live, we get about inside all the time, right? We go from a building to a car, from a car to a building, and we spend little time outside, but it's a good thing to be outside, and I love the outside, so you should get outside. But anyways, that's kind of off the beaten path here. So he takes this stone, okay, and he's lying down to go to sleep with his head against the stone, kind of propped up. And just think for a minute here, because this is Jacob, right? So now we know in this story that Jacob's all alone, right? He's all alone. Why is he all alone? He's all alone, and he's all alone in the dark. Why is he all alone, and why is he all alone in the dark? He's all alone, and he's all alone in the dark because he's going to make a 550-mile journey. Now, what might you be feeling as you're laying down to go to sleep on a 550-mile journey to which you don't know much about? You don't know where you're going, and you don't know what's going to happen between now and the next couple of weeks as you make this journey. Wouldn't there be a certain sense of uncertainty about your future? I would have to imagine Jacob has this uncertainty about what lies ahead. He's going on this journey. He's sent out to find a wife from his mom's family whom he's never met. He has no idea who these people are. And once he finds this wife, what is he going to do? He has no idea about that. He's back home, life is comfortable. Back home, he has a good relationship with his mom, not the greatest relationship with his dad, and probably not the greatest relationship with his brother. Matter of fact, that's the second thing he's probably thinking about. He's afraid because the relationship with his brother is so fractured. So he's running. Right? 40 miles seems to indicate that. He covered a lot of distance fairly quickly. It seems as though he's quite afraid. And so now it's the nighttime. Now what happens at night? You can't see. And if your brother you're fleeing from, and you know you got a head start, but you don't know about what he might know, he might be right behind you. And so now you're laying down to go to sleep, it's pitch black, and you've got to be somewhat concerned about your own safety in this moment. What's going to happen? Not only that, I would conjecture that he's probably, as he's lying down to go to sleep, he's probably thinks about what got him into the situation that he's in. And why is he now having to make this long journey? Well, what got him there? Well, what got him there was his deceiving relationship with his brother, his deceiving relationship with his father, so fractured family relationships. And now, because of that deceit, the attempt of death, his life being taken, and so he probably begins to have a sense of, maybe a sense of self-understanding, a sense of shame and guilt over the ways that he's acted. Maybe his heart begins to open. Maybe his heart begins to soften, and he realizes where he's at. It kind of makes me think of this song that we occasionally sing. Death was arrested, right? And the song goes, alone in my sorrow and dead in my sin. Alone in my sorrow, dead in my sin. Alone in my sorrow, all alone in my guilt and my shame. All alone because of the consequences of my sin that has brought death in my relationships. Here's this guy, he's alone and afraid, and perhaps the Spirit of God is doing a work on his heart, and he's beginning to sense that he's behaved in bad ways and wrong ways. Now, if we kind of think about Jacob and perhaps begin to apply some of these concepts and thoughts to our own life, some of us may be here all alone as well, alone in our dark night. Well, perhaps it's daylight right now and we're sitting in a lit room, but we're alone in the darkness of where we've been. Perhaps it's because of our choices, but maybe it's not because of our choices. Maybe we're alone in our recent visit to an AA meeting. And it was just the first time there, and you're there, and you're all alone, and you're seeking help, and you want your life to change, but it's challenging. Or maybe it's alone in an appointment with the attorney because you're facing some relational issues or some challenging other issues. Or maybe it's you're alone in the hospital. Maybe alone in the car on the return from visiting somebody in the hospital. Or maybe it's you're all alone in the reality that you've just been informed that your services are no longer needed at work, and now you're without a job, and you're alone in trying to figure out what lies ahead. How am I going to make ends meet? Maybe you're alone in your depression, or maybe you're alone in your repeated sin. You just can't get out of it. You seem trapped in. And again, maybe some of this is because of, like Jacob, your choices. But maybe some of them have nothing to do with your choices, but you're alone in this dark place. It's in this sense of aloneness that Jacob lies down to go to sleep. Human being just like you and me, thinking and probably feeling all of these kinds of things. And as he begins to doze off, everything that happens in the rest of the story is just kind of crazy. So what the text tells us is that he had a dream as he begins to doze off. He has a dream in which he saw a stairway resting on the earth with its top reaching all the way up into the heavens. And then as he sees the stairway, he sees these angels that are walking down the steps and these angels that are walking up the step. They're going up and down these steps. Now, I invite you to just kind of think of your own home or some place where you've been where there's a lot of steps. Maybe it's walking from the parking lot up into the lobby into our building. And then take that picture of those steps and just see them continuing to go up, as far up as up can go. This is what he sees in his dream. And not just the staircase, but he sees these angels that are walking down to earth from way up there, and then angels who are on the earth who go walking up way up to there. I mean, what a stunning dream. It's almost like he's found this portal, right? He's found this way to connect with heaven. So here's Jacob, who's all alone in the darkness, and in his aloneness in the darkness, God appears. And this is the message that, in the sense that you get, is that God appears to Jacob and sends to him a message through these messengers, these angels. That's what angels are. They're messengers. But this message of security and comfort and connectedness to God. Again, he's all alone. But now in this moment, he's not alone. In this moment, he has eyes to see things that he could not see. He's uncovered and discovered a gateway to heaven. Now, it's very interesting that God gives him this dream of angels. And this is not the first time that we encountered angels in our study in the book of Genesis, is it? Because angels appeared to Abraham. And then angels appeared to Lot, Abraham's nephew. And it was by their hands that they took Lot and his wife and kids out of the city. And so angels appearing, this is not the first time in the story, but it is a puzzling kind of a dream, is it not? I mean, like, think of how odd this is. And what do these angels look like? We're not told. And what we see in the earlier stories is they look like people. They appeared as people, as just normal people. Do they appear as normal people here, or do they appear as somebody different? But this is an insight into the spirit realm, because angels are ministering spirits. So there are other verses in the Bible that talk about angels. Psalm 91, for example, verse 11 and 12 say, God will command his angels concerning you to guard you in all of your ways. And they will lift you up in their hands so that you will not strike your foot against a stone. That was the same verse that Satan quoted to Jesus when he was tempting him in the desert. Hebrews 1 tells us in verse 14, are not all angels ministering spirits? So there's a sense in which God recognizes Jacob in his aloneness. And God appears to Jacob in a supernatural, in a unique and very different way, in a dream. And he gives him this dream in which there's this connectedness between God and the earth, between Jacob and his aloneness, and God and his presence and his care. This, of course, evokes all kinds of interesting questions like, are there angels involved in our life? And in what ways? And how might they be ministering spirits to us? And that certainly brings all kinds of interesting questions to which I don't have all the answers. And to which, even as we study Scripture, there's so much mystery to it. But perhaps there have been times in your life when you've been all alone and God had sent an angel, a ministering spirit, to assist and to care for you. And maybe you're in this place right now where you're all alone, and he will do that. And maybe he won't. What happens next in the story, in his dream, is in verse 13, there above this stairway stood the Lord. And he hears this voice. So again, picture in your mind these stairs going all the way up, way up, and there's angels walking up and down. And now in his dream, Jacob hears a voice. He hears a voice speaking to him. He hears the voice of God. Notice it's in your English translation that as the Lord begins to speak, he says, I am the Lord. He introduces himself as I am Yahweh. Capital L, capital O, capital R, capital D. In your English translation, getting at the Hebrew understanding that when God identifies himself, he's identifying himself as the God who's over all, the supreme God. He's sovereign. I am the Lord. I am the God of your father Abraham and the God of Isaac, and I will give you and your descendants the land on which you are lying, and your descendants will be like the dust of the earth, and you will spread out to the west and to the east and to the north and to the south, and all peoples on earth will be blessed through you and your offspring. Does that sound familiar? I mean, this is the same words that God said when he appeared to Abraham. In a vision, he appeared to Abraham. He said the same thing to Abraham. And again, he appeared to Isaac. And he appeared to Abraham multiple times, giving him this same promise. And now he appears to Jacob. So it's to Abraham, it's to Isaac, and it's to Jacob. The same promise, the same covenant. I'm going to bless you. I'm going to turn you into a great nation. I'm going to give you a land, and I'm going to bless the world through you. Now again, he's alone. He's in the dark. He's afraid. He's living in uncertainty. He's desperate. And God appears with this reminder. And not only that, listen to what else he says to him. He says, I am with you, and I will watch over you wherever you go on this uncertain journey that you're taking. I am watching over you. And I will bring you back. You're going to go somewhere, but you're going to come back to this land. And I will not leave you until I've done what I promised you. Now, can you imagine what this would be like in this place of darkness, in this place of aloneness, to have this supernatural dream, this connection between the earth and God. And in just the moment that you need it to receive this promise that perhaps you had heard repeated to you by your father. Perhaps Isaac told Jacob, son, I had this dream, I had this vision in which God promised. And perhaps Jacob had this conversation with his grandfather Abraham, in which his grandfather said, hey, God has appeared to me several times, and he promised this. And then on top of that, to have these words of God, the Lord, to say, you're not alone. I'm with you. I'm going with you. Wherever you go, I'm going with you. You're not alone. I'm with you. Trust me in this. I'm with you. I will not desert you. I will not leave you alone. I won't leave you in your circumstance. I won't leave you alone in the attorney's office. I won't leave you alone in the AA meeting. I won't leave you alone as you journey through the hardships of life. You're not alone. I'm with you. Remember Susan? Picking up that story, on Monday morning when Susan followed the practice route to the bus and climbed the stairs and paid the bus driver, and she went to work and she returned home, everything went flawless on that day for her. And then, because it went so well, she did it again the next day, on Tuesday, and then she did it on Wednesday and Thursday and on Friday. But Friday was a different morning. On Friday morning, when Susan paid her fare, the bus driver said, ma'am, you are so lucky. And Susan said, are you talking to me? And the bus driver said, yes, it must feel good to be cared for as you are. And Susan replied, I don't know what you're talking about. And the bus driver said, well, every morning when I drop you off at your stop, as soon as these doors open, I can see a man who's standing over there in the corner, and he watches you. As soon as you step off the bus, his eyes are on you, and his eyes follow you as you walk across the parking lot. And his eyes don't leave you as you're trying to walk up those stairs. And when your hand touches the doorknob, his eyes are still on you until you open the door and go inside. That man doesn't take his eyes off you. And once the door closes, he blows you a kiss. Jennifer goes on to say that Susan burst into tears in that moment, and she had no idea that her husband had been watching her all that time. That he had been there all that time, even though she couldn't see him. Even though we cannot see God. Even though our eyes, our human eyes, do not enable us to see into the spirit realm, this story teaches us that there is one. This story teaches us that God sees us, and he wants us to know that he sees us, and he wants us to know that we're not alone. We're not alone in life. He's with us. And whatever it is that we are journeying through. It reminds me of Jesus' words, the words from which we get our vision to be internally strong and externally focused. In Matthew chapter 28, when he says to his disciples to go into the world and to make disciples and to baptize and to teach them to obey everything that I command you. And then he ends with this. He says, and I am with you to the end of the age, to the end of time, the time of this age in which people live. This promise that Jesus is with us. We're not alone. If we are followers of Jesus Christ, we're not alone. God is with us. As we sang the words of that last song, Jesus is in this room. He's not in this room because we sing the song. He's in this room because he's in the room. Too often we're not aware. We don't have eyes to see. We live our lives alone. And this text serves as an encouragement. This text serves as a reminder. This text serves as a means to help us as we go through the hard things and the dark places of life when we're alone, to be reminded that, no, we're not, in fact, all alone. Now, the end of the story is equally as important as this truth that we've just observed. So the truth that we just saw is that God is with us all the time, right? We're not alone. But what we're about to see is Jacob's response to it. So verse 16 tells us that when Jacob awoke from his sleep, he had this thought: surely, certainly, absolutely, the sovereign God of the universe is in this place. He's in this room. And I'm not aware of it. And he was afraid. Jacob was in a sense of awe that God was present. How awesome is this place? This is none other than the house of God. This is the gate of heaven. And so early the next morning, Jacob got up. He took the stone that he had placed under his head to prop up his head, the stone he was using when he fell off to sleep, and he set it up as a pillar, and then he poured oil on top of it. The anointing with oil is a practice that we see throughout the Old Testament. It is a way to dedicate, to set aside, to say this instrument or this person is holy or selected and is separate than everything else. So he takes this pillar, he pours the oil on top of it, and then he calls the place Bethel, though the city used to be called Luz. Bethel meaning the house of God. That's what the word means, the house of God. This is the house of God. Then Jacob made a vow. Because of his experience, Jacob made a vow saying, if, that word can also be translated since God will be with me and will watch over me on this journey that I am about to take, and since God will give me food to eat and clothes to wear, so that I will return safely to my father's house, since God is going to do this, then this sovereign Lord will be my God. It seems as though in this moment, there is something that takes place in Jacob's heart where he says that God is going to be his God. The same God that appeared to Isaac, the same God that appeared to his grandfather Abraham. And there were moments for Abraham and there was moments for Isaac in which they declared, God is going to be my God. It doesn't appear that throughout the time of Jacob's life, that at least not up until now, has he ever acknowledged that? Has he ever stated that? The God, you're going to be my God, and I'm going to follow you. You're going to be my God. I've lived in a family where the parents went to church. You know, my parents went to church, and so I've always gone along, and it's been about their God. It's been about their religion. It's about what they have to say. And it seems as though that might be what's going on with Jacob. But in this moment, because of this supernatural, unbelievable experience he has, he declares, God is going to be my God. He makes this vow. God is going to be my God. And this stone that I set up as a pillar will be God's house. And of all that you give me, I will give you a tenth. This is the vow that I'm making. This is the vow that I'm making. I am selecting you as God. And because you're going to be my God, I am going to be obedient and faithful to you. Not only that, but I'm going to recognize that all that I have is a gift from you. And I'm going to give back some of what it is that you've given to me. I'm going to give a tenth. I'm going to invite our worship team to come up. And as they come, I'm going to ask you this, just think about this. Have you had a Bethel moment? Have you ever had a Bethel moment? Have you ever had this moment in which it's like God somehow, it's like God is here. God is in the room and you know it. I can remember my first Bethel moment. It was when I was 6 years old. It was after a worship service. It was after hearing about life and death and heaven and hell. And God met me in that moment. It was something taking place in my mind and in my heart as he was speaking and drawing me to himself. And the moment ended with me on my knees and my mother beside me, guiding me through a prayer to which I vowed to God he would be my God. I was a young kid. I remember that Bethel moment. And I go back to that Bethel moment every now and then. There's another one in my life. I was 11 years old. I was at camp. It was the middle of the week. It was fun. There was teaching and God was speaking. And I didn't know I was at this portal, at this place between God and above and me on earth below. And I was lying in my bunk bed at night. And everybody else was asleep, but I was restless. And tears began to flow down the side of my cheeks. And I didn't know what was going on. I got out of bed and I found my counselor and he took me out, sat on the step, and as we looked up at the night sky, it was pitch dark. He walked me through a series of questions that helped me to understand that this was a Bethel moment, that God was speaking to me. And as I looked up into those night skies, I declared to God, I'll do whatever you want me to do. I'll go anywhere you want me to go. And I stand here today because of that commitment. Not because I wanted somehow to be a pastor or somehow I wanted to lead God's church. But this is something that God called me to do. Do you have a Bethel moment? Have you had a Bethel moment? Can you remember it? Can you go back to it in your mind's eye? You need to. We need to do this. It reminds us that we're not alone, that God is with us, that he is working, because there's so many times in life that it's so hard and so dark and we feel so alone and God's so not there. We need to be reminded of this. And lastly, Jacob made a commitment. He made a commitment with his resources, his financial resources. I don't know where you are with that. I just invite you to do what Jacob did, though. God has exceedingly provided for me and my family financially as we have trusted him and lived by this principle to give. if you've never made that vow, God, I'm going to trust you with my finances. Okay, right now I've got myself into the financial situation that I'm in, and it's a mess, and I don't know how to get out of it, and I've made a mess, and I really probably shouldn't give anything because I don't have anything to give, and that's the way that a lot of us think. And it may be true that you are in that place. God teaches us to give. If you keep reading Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, I've kind of kept on going. You know, I'm all the way into Deuteronomy now, and I've been impressed recently as I'm working my way through how God takes them in the nation into the promised land, and he gives each of the 12 sons of Jacob these allotted places, but he doesn't give the Levites, the priests of God, anything. Instead, he says the whole nation is to give a tenth, and that tenth is to go to the Levites. This is how they're going to make their living. And the Levites, they serve as priests over the nation, the representative of God and of God to the people and of the people to God. Do you give? Do you give to Hope Community Church? A lot, obviously we're making our budget, so definitely, yes, lots of us are, but maybe you're in a place that you don't. Maybe today's your day. Maybe today's your day to make this vow and this commitment. I urge you to do it. You will not be disappointed. God takes care of you. He really does, if you really trust him. It's not magic. It's not magic. It's not easy either. There'll be ups and downs. You'll have times in which you'll be questioning and wondering, how am I going to get out of this mess? But I'll meet you. All right, I got to leave. I keep preaching. Lead us in this final song, James.
Would you stand? May this song be your prayer. I can see where I'm going. The lines are blurred, but you're showing me love. Love in the midst of the dark. And I don't know
In John chapter 10, Jesus says, I am the gate. I am the gate. This portal, this gateway that Jacob saw, Jesus comes and declares to be the gate, the portal, the access to the Father. Let's pursue Jesus. Make that vow, that commitment. Keep going back to it. Have a great week, church. See you next Sunday.